Thank you so much for attending tonight, and thank you so much to our presenters who are graciously going to share their knowledge and expertise. My name is Leah Giacumo, and this is OPWL Networks, Relationships Matter in Your ID, LX, and HPT career. So we're talking shop tonight with our OPWL experts. I remember the first time I heard about the concept of networking when I joined a graduate program. It was an introductory course and the concept was simple, but I really couldn't think about how to put it in practice. I mean, I understood that I should build relationships with other professionals, but I didn't really know what that might look like or how to invest in more than a handshake at a conference. So my goal here today is to help others learn about networking, why it's important, how to do it, and also to foster some new contacts for our OPWLers. So welcome, everyone. I hope you can identify by the end of this presentation at least one person here today who you can send a follow-up email to after our event is over. I mean, why not invite someone to coffee over a video chat, just like you could at a conference? Chances are they will say yes. And just to be clear, this webinar will be recorded and posted on the OPWL Webinar Archive website so that others can gain access to it in the future. So today we're going to get to meet and talk with some professionals who work as IDs, LX designers, and performance improvement specialists. They've each developed their careers and expertise through both hard work and networking. And I met each of these individuals by networking. I got to know them mostly in courses or at conferences, on Facebook and LinkedIn social media. I did this kind of as a proof of concept to demonstrate that you too can make valued connections in your coursework, online, and at a distance. Valued professional connections that help you develop through networking can lead to new experiences and opportunities to both learn, work, and grow. In fact, my entire career has been built on a solid theoretical foundation, technical knowledge and skills, a lot of hard work, substantial grit, quite a thick skin, and networking. So let's get started. Again, I hope that by the end of this webinar, you're able to identify at least one inspirational person who used networking to land a freelance or permanent ID position and with whom you can relate to on some level. Also, I hope you can identify at least 4 networking strategies, approaches, how-to tools that you can use now and later on in your career. Each of our 7 panelists will begin by telling their career development story, starting as either a teacher or a trainer or an ID, or straight out of their master's degree program from graduation to today. Also, they will each describe their favorite networking behaviors, strategies that they implemented during the beginning of their careers to develop their social networks, and those things that they do now, if they're any different. The specific outcomes, whether they might be tangible, intangible, personal, professional, that they got from their efforts, described previously, then and now, and the lessons that they learned about what to do and not to do. And at the end of the webinar, there'll be an open Q&A session. So please be sure to type any questions that arise into the chat box as we go. During the Q&A, I will facilitate a discussion regarding the questions you have asked at the end and any more that might arise. So while I may not get to your chat box questions immediately, we will circle around back to them at the end. All right. Dr. Scott Casad, can you lead us off?
Happy to start. It's always good to go first, right? I like first, I don't like last. So, well, hi everybody. Great to have you on here. I am Scott Casad. I am a graduate of the IPT program years back. And my career path really started as an instructor working for the Coast Guard. I was active duty Coast Guard for 23 years, recently retired, and I sort of got hooked on the whole HPT thing while I was an instructor and learning, and eventually a few grad degrees, a few conferences, great people through Boise State. And I eventually, when I left the Coast Guard, I was running training at our training center in Yorktown. Recently moved into talent management, which is not a military term by any means, and currently work at CarMax, doing lots of great things around helping our talent grow and be better. I'm a LinkedIn person. You asked about what our preference is. I'm a LinkedIn person. I would say I'm a LinkedIn person like in the last 18 months when it became time to leave from the military. And I got really into it and started figuring out how to use it and how to connect with it. So I'd love to share just a few of my sort of tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, and what my strategies have been. So I start off with, everyone knows what LinkedIn looks like, but I put it up here as a way of just really emphasizing the idea that you need to start thinking about what your brand is. And I can tell you from being in the military for all those years, I didn't think about it. I really didn't, because we're very insular, and we don't have to network really to grow. You just have to know people within the Coast Guard. When I started thinking about getting out is when I realized, hey, I don't know what my brand is. Like, I don't know who I know who I am, but like, I don't know who professionally I want to present myself as. So my lesson learned was I waited too long to start that effort. And I would start with whatever you've got, whatever you have, what's on your mind, what you're thinking about, who you are, what you like, what you don't. Maybe don't put what you don't like, but allude to what inspires you, and use that to start building your brand as soon as you can. I think the other part of that building the brand is find others who can mentor you, who've been down that path. Talk to them about their LinkedIn. Go, cyber stalk some folks. Find things that you like that people are doing, and replicate that. And if you can afford it and it makes sense for you, there are a lot of professional services out there to help you to do that work, to write, to get the right words, to make sure it makes sense, it flows right, it looks right, and that's worth it. I found it was really worth it when it came time for job searching. And I wasn't really trying to connect, but I was really trying to make a real impression on somebody who wanted to give me a paycheck every 2 weeks. So the next part of my strategy really gets around asking, and what I mean by ask is ask to serve and be of service. This is how I started my networking. I was at Boise State. I went to an ISPI conference in San Francisco on a great student discount rate. And I started getting connected to ISPI, and my path with ISPI eventually led me to board service, and just recently, last spring, finished up my term as the president of ISPI. But it all started because I asked somebody at a research committee, social, eat little crackers after hours meeting, hey, how can I help? What can I do? How can I get involved? So find a way to volunteer and be of service, whether it's locally, regionally, nationally, internationally, it doesn't really matter. Just find a way to serve a little bit. What I found for me is, because I was in the military and I'd grown up in the military, is it really helped me to learn how the world works outside of the military. I got to really hear stories from other people. I got to hear about what they're dealing with. Turns out we're all dealing with a lot of the same stuff. It's just has a different color, wearing a different jacket. It also allowed me to build some skills that I wouldn't have gotten at work. I never had to learn what P&Ls were. I didn't have to learn how money came in and out and how taxes were done for nonprofits. So I really learned a lot of new skills that I wouldn't have otherwise by not serving. Then certainly you just start to build relationships. You start to connect with people as you work through that, and you get to, see and hear and get LinkedIn connections around that. So the next sort of strategy I have is sort of as you move later into your career, once you've done some of that service, I really think there's a real value in leading. So serving is one thing, leading and serving is another thing. And I think you really start to grow your network when you lead, because when you start leading, it really makes you start to stand out a little bit. It makes you become that leader in the industry. I mean, it's a bad pun, but you do start to really have some impact around there. You get to bring your experience, expertise to making things better. And you really start to leverage your network, because when you lead, you realize you can't do it alone. We all know this. And if you're leading, especially like in a nonprofit or in some sort of industry, society or something, it takes it takes more than a village. It takes like an entire community to do that, to make that happen. And so that's leading when people aren't paid and don't have to follow your directions is a different kind of leading. And it really pushes you to build some skills and to build real relationships that aren't based on command and control and I'm your boss. You really have to really build and foster those relationships. And it seems to expand your network pretty quickly. And then lastly, I think ultimately, and I think probably most of us will say this, is at some point you've got to find a way to give back in this process, whether it's helping with building that brand, connecting somebody to service opportunities, or even leading. Find that way to help somebody that you can. And I saw this really when I was in my service with ISPI, but when I was, the people who paid it back to me when I was job searching, getting out of the Coast Guard, the number of people that I hit up on LinkedIn and said, hey, do you know X, Y, do you know such and such? Can you make an introduction? It was amazing what people are willing to do. And what I would say here too is find a way to connect with young professionals. It's really easy to get connected to, like, I'm in this sort of role, or I'm in this sort of position in an organization, and I sort of network with the people who are like me. Young professionals have a new perspective on things. They also have an interesting network that I think is worth leveraging from time to time to really help grow and be better at what we do. So those are sort of my strategies, some lessons learned along the way. Thank you, Lisa, for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Scott. I think it's great. I was just in a webinar earlier today talking about how to ensure that you have diversity in your networking, making sure you have people 10 years up, 10 years down from you, both ways, and all sorts of depth to your diversity in your network. So those are great points. And, can you share any outcomes that you had from networking?
Yeah, so I've had opportunities to write. So I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, would you like to help write a chapter, publish? So those are great opportunities if that's something you're interested in. My job at CarMax was absolutely 100% because of networking. I mean, that's, anybody who's been job searching knows filling out applications is not quite worthless, but it's like 99% worthless until you can really connect with someone. And I'll say what was interesting for me is that connection was through a personal connection. So that wasn't like a professional network connection. It was somebody I know knew somebody at CarMax. And so when we think of networking, we also often think of it being professionally, but certainly there's also just a personal, what's going on in your life kind of connections that can lead to professional connections as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I kind of was thinking that might have been how it was, but I didn't. Yeah. That's I find the same too. A lot of my jobs came to me through people I knew in unsurprising ways. People that I worked with 15 years ago when we were doing something entirely different, and we just kept in contact, and now we're doing this new thing, and they're like, hey, can you help me with this thing? And it just happens like that. So yeah, definitely in courses and in conferences, but also remembering the people that you met a long time ago too. Yeah. Very cool. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Roberta Dombrowski.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming and sharing.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, my name is Roberta Dombrowski. Currently, I am a lead UX researcher at edX, which is an online learning platform. Universities will partner with us to make their just programs available to millions of learners all around the world. In my free time, I say free time in quotes, I do consulting, and so I started my own company, Learn Mindfully. I actually started that while I was doing the OPWL program. I thought it was just a great opportunity to just apply the skills that I was learning in the program, but wasn't able to apply during my full-time job that I had at the time. I've been in the industry for about 9 years now. I've jumped around quite a bit. I started in like service desk at technology companies and then moved into user experience and product. I've always just loved solving problems, and that's really what drives me every single day. And my social network of choice is actually Twitter. I find that the millennial in me really likes just talking on social media, and there's a lot of like special interest topic groups related to learning. There's tons of communities. Like there's an e-learning guild chat that happens like every Friday at a specific time, and people will all come on and talk about things. And you can also find me on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, I can share a little bit about what's worked for me in terms of networking over the year. I feel like it's been like 3 different phases. When I was originally starting out in my career, I was definitely like more on the sidelines. I was someone who just like I always wanted more information. I'm always trying to digest information. That's probably why I love research. So I like participated in virtual communities. I would like go to webinars similar to the one today and just like be watching people talking, reading, meeting people at conferences. And then I noticed that I started to get more confidence while I was in the OPWL program. I felt like I was like rounding out my approach. And I started to form just like my own personal voice. And so I started just taking a more active approach. I started my Twitter profile. I started my own website, my consulting company. I started blogging about things that we were like talking about in the program. And I just wanted to talk more about it. Like, I remember I wrote like a 500-word essay about task analysis and why I love them. Like, who does that? I loved it at the time. And I would just post about like projects or trends that I'm seeing. I started to go to like more in-person events. So I switched from virtual only to more in-person. And then I started like mentoring and coaching people. So just like Scott said, giving back has started to become more of a focus to me. Really just like making connections and introducing people to each other, which is really great. And I actually got my current job by networking as well. I met someone, there's like a Boston product group, and they knew that I loved research and they gave me a referral, which was great. But other outcomes that have kind of come out of it is just like speaking requests like this one. I'm going to be doing like an e-learning guild virtual conference in a few weeks. We're talking about learning experience design. It's nice when you don't have to submit proposals for events because they just reach out to you because they know you and how you present, which is great. In 2018, I won a 30 Under 30 award for Elliott Macy's Learning 2018 conference. So they like found a lot of my writing online, and my boss at the time referred me without telling me. He like supported me, which was really exciting because that's just an award in the industry. I get recruiters reaching out on LinkedIn at least a few times a week, job offers. And then just the thing that drives me every day is I just want to see other people. I want to give back to other people. I've had a lot of great mentors over the year. Like I've had bosses that I've connected with. I've had just people that have like sat down and taken time out of their day to like meet with me for tea or like a virtual call. So I just want it to be a reciprocating cycle and always give back. I keep my LinkedIn messages open and I try to just respond to people if they email me and stuff like that. So yeah, that's just a few things that have worked for me.
I love that. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I love how you pointed out how you started, your social presence before you ever graduated. You started your company during the program. You started putting yourself out there. So, Dr. Casad was telling us that, he just started in the last 18 months. So really it's never too early or too late. You can find cool things will happen. You just got to start making them happen, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Doing the work. Yeah, so awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, we have Brian Thompson.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Excellent. Really great pleasure to be here today. So much of what Scott said really resonated with me, and I'll try to, and is almost duplicative of what I want to say, so I'll try to add a little different spin on it. And Roberta's, her enthusiasm is infectious. Listening to her talk, I feel a little bit like a dinosaur because I'm not technologically savvy. I definitely don't approach networking like a millennial. I'm a little bit old school when it comes to networking. So hopefully what I have to offer here is still really resonant. But I have about going on 20 years of experience, and this was a really cool opportunity for me to kind of reflect back on my career and how networking has played a role throughout my career. So I'll share a couple of brief stories. I've been really fortunate to be able to work in the industry from the time that I graduated from the OPWL program. I've got to work with a lot of large international corporations that have taken me overseas and moved to a lot of different parts of the country, and got to do some really cool stuff. And I've worked in the semiconductor industry, I've worked in the financial industry, I've worked in retail and marketing, and I've spent the last 7 years in healthcare. So I'm currently the Director of Organizational Development and Learning for Ascension Health, which is about 160,000 associates based out of St. Louis. I live here in Boise, so my entire world is remote work from my home office and travel. So I've had really a lot of different jobs in a lot of different industries. And as I was reflecting back about how networking has played a role in my career, I recognized in all of those job interviews that I had, only once did I ever go in without knowing somebody or having a connection or a networking element to that conversation. So every single opportunity, barring my move to healthcare, was created through my network. And so for me, that's a great outcome. The other outcome, I'll get to to my strategies here in a second, but the other outcome I want to call out is I've had the opportunity to hire a dozen different times graduates of the program, and also have been able to, so 12 times I've hired graduates, and really see a differentiation between an OPWL graduate and somebody who comes from more of a traditional learning and development background, and have also recommended several employees who have gone into the program. I have a couple who are in the program now who work for me. And so I want to approach my thoughts on networking both from my own experience as a job seeker and networker, but also one who a lot of times people reach out to me for networking, and I kind of want to look at it from that perspective as well. So if we go to the next slide and look at some of the strategies that emerged for me as I was thinking through this. The first one, short-term strategies, again, this is almost from the perspective of me sitting in my seat today, where people reach out to me several times a week, networking to look for opportunities in my organization. And it made me really think about those who spend time to do due diligence and who know who I am when they reach out to me, and they know why. And I'll give you a really clear example. Just since Lisa invited me to be a part of this webinar, I've had 6 or 7 people reach out to me through LinkedIn or through connections to ask for my time. And of those, only one did I accept the invitation to meet and have a phone call with. Of all those who reached out to me, every one of them said something along the lines of, hey, I see you're in organizational development, specifically healthcare. I'm really passionate about healthcare. I want to pursue organizational development. One person said all that and then followed it up with, I can't imagine what you're going through with COVID-19. I would imagine that your workforce is transitioning quite a lot, and your efforts there are really focused on helping your associates go through the pandemic. And at the same time, I imagine you're moving your training virtual. I've got some experience in virtual training. Would you be interested in talking with me to see any thoughts I might have that might be helpful? And guess which one I met for a phone call. So that person who reached out, who clearly did their due diligence, knew who I was, and anticipated the challenges I was dealing with, really shifted the focus to where I wasn't just willing to meet with that person, I was super eager to meet with that person. And if I had a position open, I'd hire this person based on the conversation that we had. So take that time and do your due diligence, do your studying, and don't reach out. It kind of leads to the next one. Don't reach out just with an offer to connect, or excuse me, with the desire to network. And that's why I put, don't just reach out with a handshake to say, this is who I am and I want to meet you. That's great and all, and I'm open and happy to meet with anybody who has an interest in meeting with me. I'm always flattered, but when I think about the reality of how much time I have to invest in responding to those kinds of requests, it's always the ones who reach out with an offer. And Scott really hit on this. It really resonated with me when he talked about reach out with an offer to help. When I think back to early part of my career, there was one job that I took that really was pivotal in my career. It was the one job where I was moving from kind of an ISD role into a true kind of performance improvement type of a role. And it was an opportunity I created for myself because I reached out with an offer to help. I was working in a large semiconductor manufacturing organization. For you Boise people, you probably can guess where I was, at Micron, and we had 2 departments merge. And I wasn't a part of either of those departments, but the departments merged, and I started to hear through the grapevine that the merger wasn't going well, and that a lot of the displaced leadership was really unhappy with what happened. And I realized that they needed to do an organizational needs analysis, and nobody was doing it. And so I reached out to the department manager who was in charge of this new merged department, and I sat with him and I said, I think I know how to help you. I think I can do an organizational needs analysis for you, and I can help you understand why this department merger is not going well. And within 2 weeks, I was hired and promoted to a manager role. And I didn't have to go through all of the regular networking. But because I reached out to a department manager who didn't know me with an offer to help, it created a connection that I maintain with him to this day. So those are a couple of things of advice I would give to anybody networking, especially early on in your career, is to spend that time doing the due diligence and think altruistically about what I have to offer when I reach out to others. And then when I think about longer term strategies, I almost hesitated to put this one in because it's so cliche about never burn a bridge. So I just kind of termed it differently to say amicability breeds opportunity. I do realize that this is cliche, but the very best job reference I ever got was from my worst boss I ever had. I struggled with this boss. He was only my boss for about 6 months, but he had this terrible habit of taking credit for everything that the team did, and not representing our work well. And a lot of people on the team struggled with him, and ultimately left the position with a bad taste, and left a bad taste. It was not an amicable departure. I made a real effort to maintain, because I knew he was influential, to maintain a good relationship with him, even though I was hurt by some of his actions. 2 years later, he referenced me for a job that he certainly never would have had I not maintained that amicable relationship with him and opened opportunities. So this is a small industry. I'm amazed now that I work for currently an organization where we hire people in every region across the United States, how many times the same names come up in applications. We are a small, tight-knit community, and we can't afford to be anything but amicable with each other because, as Lisa said, you never know where that next opportunity is going to come from or who's going to think of you. So never, ever burn a bridge. The last two are really closely connected, but Scott hit on this as well as Roberta too, but there's not really a difference between personal relationships and professional relationships. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. When I think about all the job opportunities that have come to me over the years, it was with people that I knew well and not just professional connections. It wasn't necessarily the person I'm connected to on LinkedIn. It was the person who knew my heart. It was the person who knew my interests, who knew my weaknesses, who thought of me for a position. And so that challenge to be vulnerable, to be authentic and curious is so much more powerful than trying to come off looking professional. Early in my career, I was really worried about being professional, having a professional front, a professional face. I had mastered my handshake, and I steeled up the courage to try to introduce myself to people at conferences. I found that rarely did that result in anything other than a handshake and an introduction. It's when I took that extra step to not be brave and was just vulnerable and actually took a real authentic curiosity into somebody else's life, learned through authentic curiosity what drove them to their career, that I had a personal connection. And when you tell them, that you might not even know how to solve a problem, that opens up a conversation and a dialogue where we're all working together to solve a problem. And so coming off, instead of being overconfident, like, look at my experience and my capabilities, coming at a relationship saying, I don't know necessarily how to help you with this problem, but I'm all in helping you figure it out. Whenever I have those kinds of connections or conversations with somebody, they become really top of my hiring list when I have a position available. They're the people that I call to, not my professional network, my personal network. And the last thing I would say is, like I said, I'm a bit of a dinosaur, so I do LinkedIn, I do Twitter. I don't do it great. I would say that your portfolio, don't look at LinkedIn as being your portfolio of networking. LinkedIn is an avenue to getting people onto your phone, people that you know, people that you can call, that level of relationship. LinkedIn should be viewed, in my opinion, as only a catalyst to get to know people well enough that this is your portfolio. This is your network. It exists at your hip with real phone numbers, with real connections, with real relationships. And those are always the go-tos to create those opportunities. So that's what I had.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate how you are talking about, you don't have to know everything and all the answers. I think a curiosity, like you said, and being vulnerable and authentic will take you much further. And investing in people as individuals. So yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. And I also really appreciate your story, Brian, about how it feels from the other side, right? When people are approaching you. And that offers some great perspective as well, I think. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So next up we have Shelley Gable.
Hey everyone. So I guess just to give you a bit of my backstory, I graduated from the program back in 2008, and I landed my first job as an instructional designer with Citibank right after that. When I left Citibank, which was nearly 10 years later, I was leading a team of multilingual instructional designers and focusing on training projects for global audiences. After that, I went on to work for Charter Communications, also known as Spectrum, and depending on where you live, they might be your internet service provider. And there I led a team that specialized in all things multimedia and online learning. The team consisted of e-learning instructional designers, graphic designers, animators. We were a brand new team when I joined the company, and we were tasked with a mission to demonstrate the ways online learning could be effective. Fast forward to today, and I've been working at WellBiz Brands for about a year now. WellBiz is a franchising company with wellness and beauty brands, and I gotta tell you, I love it there. The brands are fun, the culture is really positive. Once again, I'm part of a new L&D team. I really like being a part of new team startups. And we're on a mission to evolve the culture of learning among our franchisees. So that's a little about me. So if we go on to networking strategies. So honestly, guys, my approach to networking is super simple and really hasn't changed much over the years. And of the concepts on the slide, I think the first one is probably the most noteworthy for me. And since others have kind of spoken a fair amount to the other two, I think I'll mostly focus on the first one. So with that in mind, I don't know, I feel like a lot of us have a tendency at work and at school to naturally develop sort of an inner circle of people, right, socially. They're the people that we have multiple classes with, or the people we're frequently on projects with, that type of thing. And so we sort of click with them naturally. They're convenient relationships to nurture. And so I would encourage you to consider how you can build connections with colleagues who are not in that inner circle. So I'm still talking about like your classmates and coworkers, but just kind of a step removed from the people you tend to interact with the most. That's something I've been really deliberate about over the years, and it's really paid off for me. So just to give an example, when I was at Citibank, we had a really large L&D team. And so really, I only worked with a handful of people on the team frequently. And so I liked to go out of my way to connect with some of the others that I didn't cross paths with as much. And so one way I would do that is by asking people about their projects. And so sometimes I would hear about other projects going on, you know, through the rumor mill or through like organizational updates. And if I heard one that just sounded kind of interesting to me, and I knew who was working on it, I'd reach out to them and tell them I was intrigued and ask if they'd spend some time telling me about it. And I consistently found that people I reached out to were not only willing, but actually enthusiastic about chatting with me and talking shop about their project, even if it was yet another meeting in their day. And I guess if you think about it, it does make sense, right? It makes sense because that type of reach out that isn't attached to, an otherwise work obligation, it gives the other person a sense of being seen and valued, right? And so, you know, at school, when I was in school, at work, I just try to regularly reach out to people that I don't have to work with per se. You know, and I offer to be a brainstorming buddy. I love a good brainstorming session. Sometimes I'll seek advice. In fact, sometimes seeking advice is such a great way to connect. You know, to the point that was made earlier, it's a way to kind of make yourself a bit vulnerable, share a bit of yourself with someone else, and again, show someone else that you value what they bring to the table. And so it's a great way to connect, I think. And so for me, I think my key to a strong network has been starting with making meaningful connections with contacts who aren't that far removed from me. Like I said, kind of that acquaintance level, coworker, classmate, although I think a lot of these same strategies could work with people that you meet through professional organizations or that you see over and over at conferences. And so then from there, the key is just to nurture those relationships. You know, when you're no longer coworkers or classmates, you know, you can keep it going through email, private messages on LinkedIn, phone conversations, you know, the same stuff that I've heard the others talk about too. And for me, what I've found is that because the original connection I made was a more meaningful connection, it's easy to maintain quality interactions because that was how the relationship started. So I guess to kind of round this out, thinking about specific outcomes that I've personally experienced, like others have mentioned, I've been recruited on several occasions for job opportunities. So it's always nice to have options, right? And I think it's because my contacts really know me. And so they think of me when there's positions open at their organizations that they think I might be a fit for. You know, like anyone else, I've also turned to my network for, you know, when I'm researching like tools or platforms or looking for vendor recommendations, but I do tend to reach out not just broadly to the wide range of people I know online, but to the people I actually know, because those are the people I'm probably going to get more thoughtful insights from. You know, and then of course, just having that broader network in the organization where I'm currently working can be so valuable for knowing what's really happening across the company. You know, figuring out how to work across the white spaces to get things done, finding creative ways to get resources, you know, things like that. So I guess that probably sums it up for me.
Yeah, those are some great points. Thank you so much, Shelley. I think, yeah, combining what you're saying about like, well, you've already have these relationships from being in coursework together, you know, and if I think back, I think I was most vulnerable during my coursework, right? So that creates that opportunity for that super strong, deep bond a lot of times. I think, and I still as well talk to people that I went to graduate school with too. So yeah, very cool. Thank you so much. I really appreciate those insights and tips. And it's pretty cool to hear how people are over and over again growing their network from day one when they're just starting out, and years later still, you know, tapping into that. We're get lifelong friends here in OPWL. All right, so next up we have Leah Yeatts, who actually, Leah was in one of my courses a couple years ago as she was making a transition. Leah, let's hear some more. Oh, hi Leah, can you hear me? I think we lost, oh, okay, you're here, great, awesome.
Sorry about that, I don't know if my internet cut out, but I got kicked out all of a sudden, so.
Technology.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so I'll start from the beginning. I have about 6 years of experience in the field in performance improvement and corporate learning. Prior to that, I taught middle and high school history and just decided I wanted to make a change. I got an entry-level instructional designer job. It was called Associate Instructional Design, just to get my feet wet in the field, and then decided to pursue my OPWL degree. And that led to an internal instructional design job, which I really enjoyed. And then just in February of 2019, I resigned from the internal position to start my own consultancy. So that's been a fun adventure as well. I feel like I've been through 2 career transitions now in the last 6 years, from teaching into talent development, and then from internal roles into my own business, which was a big change as well. Obviously, networking has been a huge part of both of those transitions. So we'll look at a few of those tips. I think every other panelist has hit on this, to be a giver and to really make sure that you're not just going into relationships with what you can get out of it. And I think that early on, I didn't realize I had anything to give, and I did, which was interesting looking back, even just thinking about this webinar and what I wanted to share. That, you know, when I transitioned out of teaching and into that associate instructional designer role, and I felt like I was really the low man on the totem pole and I don't know anything about this field, there were other teachers who were looking for other options. And even when I had only been in the field for a couple of months, I was doing phone calls with other teachers about, what is it that you do? What is instructional design? What does that mean? And having that attitude of just giving, I think, has really helped me in a number of different ways. I also wanted to reiterate, someone else mentioned volunteering and professional associations, and that's something that you can do right out of the gate too. If you're brand new in the field, you can find your local ATD chapter, find a local ISPI chapter, get involved and ask what their needs are. They all need volunteers. I can guarantee you that, at least all of the ones that I've seen. And it's a really great way to get to know people in a lot of varied roles and different positions, different levels of different types of organizations and industries. Just going and saying, all right, I'm here to help. What do you want me to do? You want me to hand out name badges at the door? I mean, it could be anything, but you're still getting to know those people. So that's been a really helpful thing for me too, especially as I was starting out. Second, don't hesitate to reach out and ask for help and advice. And I think it took me a little while to realize that, and it seems so obvious, but maybe because I tend to be a little more of an introvert, that was really intimidating for me at first. So I started with some of my professors when I was in the OPWL program, and especially ones who had a background in independent consulting, and said, can we just have a call and tell me about your path, tell me about what you've done, what have been the challenges, what have been the rewards. And then I also, for those of you who know Joanne Fenner, she is amazing as a resource. And I called her and I said, okay, tell me about people who have been independent consultants that are OPWL grads. Can I have their email addresses and reach out to them? And that was really valuable to me too, in making those connections and just learning from those people who were further down this path than I am and than I was at that time. Networking inside and outside of the field, I think, is really important. It's really easy to feel like all of our networking should be done within HPT or within instructional design, but I found a lot of value of networking with people that are in different areas. So one example is I was on LinkedIn and I found this person who was starting an HR consultancy, and she lives in a town that's maybe 5 miles from my house. And it was right around the time that I was starting my consulting business as well. And so I reached out to her. I didn't know her at all. We had no real connections in common. I don't even really know how we were connected on LinkedIn. Maybe it was just one of those suggestions or something. But I messaged her and I just said, hey, I see you're in Oldsmar, which is right next to Tampa, where I live. And I see you've just started an HR consultancy, and I am just starting a consulting business too, and learning development. You want to have lunch? Which is pretty bold for an introvert at the time. I don't even know why I did that, because now I'm like, wow, just to reach out to a stranger and say, do you want to have lunch? This was one of the best things I ever did. She's an amazing connection, really walked me through starting my business. And then through her, I got involved in another collaborative of women consultants. We call ourselves the SIP Collaborative because we meet at a wine bar called SIP. And it's just a group of women. We're all roughly a year into starting our independent consulting businesses, and there's a marketing consultant, operations consultant, HR consultant. I'm the only learning and development or performance improvement person there, and that group has probably been my most valuable group. And I feel like I just stumbled upon it in such a random way through that original LinkedIn message. But those women I learned so much from, because I'm not typically around people who are doing what they're doing. And it really helps me when I'm talking to my clients to have that kind of perspective. And there's even been some partnerships that have come out of that group too on various projects. So kind of think outside of just the learning and development community as well. being social, I think, is important. And a couple of people touched on this, that I know people who say, I have my professional network and then I have my friends. And I really think it's great to blend the two. Like, I don't see any reason to keep those groups separate, because I do think that when you're really building trusting relationships with people, that's what's really led to opportunities for me, whether it be learning opportunities, whether it be opportunities for new projects and new clients. Keeping up with some OPWL alumni. I had an OPWL alum that lives here in Tampa where I live, and we had never met. We didn't have a whole lot of interaction during the program, but we knew who each other was, and we started corresponding on LinkedIn just socially. And then finally we're like, well, we both live in Tampa, we should meet up for lunch. And we did, and that lunch ended up leading to a 3-month-long project with her company. And I didn't go into it, with that, expectation. She wasn't even the hiring manager for that project, but because we were social, because we just hit it off, because we had lunch, she knew of needs that were perfect for what I had to offer, and that ended up being a fantastic project. My last strategy is investing
It looks like we're
in
frozen.
relationships. I think it's a crew. Oh. Can you hear me?
Now, yeah, you blinked out though for a second. Can you hear
sorry.
me?
Yes,
No worries.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Internet must be a little having some issues. Investing in long-term relationships, I think, is super, super important, because it's not just, like Brian said, it's not just a handshake. It's not just the meeting someone. When I've gone to networking events and done that and exchanged business cards and shaken hands, like, nothing comes of that. But if I can invest in long-term relationships, seeing the same people over and over, a lot of that for me has been through my local ATD chapter. And even people I've met at conferences that I've then followed up with and maintained that communication with, that's when it really starts to pay off. So if you have, these short-term correspondences with people, or you meet them, don't think, oh, well, that didn't lead anywhere, so I'm just going to give up on that. Stick with it and keep in touch with people, and then have that giving mentality, and then eventually it kind of comes back around. And even when it doesn't, I feel like it all kind of, it works together.
Let's see if Leah comes back. Excellent tips, though. I can identify with what you said, Leah, about being an introvert. I never thought of myself as a social person. I like people, but I was a little shy to go up and say hi to somebody, or to ask them a question, or it was really hard for me to open up and be vulnerable, as other people have said during this chat, which is so important. But you know what? The more you do it, the more times you take that chance and reach out to somebody and ask them a question, or offer to lend a hand, the easier it gets. And so over time, I feel like I've grown the skills that are required to network, and to be a good networker, a good connector, and a good professional ally and friend and colleague to others. So if this is new to you and you feel like you're an introvert, just know that you're among a lot of good company. I know a lot of people in our fields that would also classify themselves as introverts, or maybe intro extroverts, can walk both lines. So know that there's a place for you here. Thank you so much, Leah, for those tips. And I'm so glad also that you mentioned to network outside your field, especially if you're going into consulting. That's so important. And you're going to be independent. That's where you're going to find a lot of jobs as well, is knowing people in the field and people who are doing other things than you. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I think we're going to move on to Sharon. Are you here?
I'm here. Hi.
Awesome.
Thank you. I want to start off saying thank you, and thank you for all the other wisdom that we got before. What I'm going to dish out, it's definitely years that I haven't had in my career. So I'm going to bring in a little bit more different perspective, but it was super amazing to hear the synthesis of all that expertise like that. So my name is Sharon, and in the 3 years that I've been in the OPWL Master's Program, I've gone from being a preschool teacher at a small preschool in San Diego to being an impactful HPT professional. And I feel like I want to be clear about my success points, just to make it clear about why, like, the professors would have invited me, someone with only 1 year in HPT experience, to be part of the panel today. And I think it's just because of how fast things have happened. So for me, I've just finished my first year in my career as a content manager and a change manager for a 100% remote, high growth tech startup. It's backed by Silicon Valley angel investors and also led by my bosses who are ex-Amazon Bezos worshippers. Let's just say it's really fast paced and it can really leave you at the edge of your seat. Also, before COVID, I was this close to signing my first contractor's contract for a corporation in Los Angeles. We'll see how that pans out after all. And I also have recurring client relationships with students in China, which means I have stellar relationships with their parents. And I've come upon all of these opportunities while I've been living abroad in central Mexico. I work 100% remotely, and it's only been 3 years, literally 3 years, since I took my first class in HPT. I did not have it all figured out. When I moved to Mexico, I did not have it all figured out, but I had at least figured out that OPWL had granted me a graduate assistantship that would eventually last 2 years. From there, I also leveraged my core project-based courses in OPWL, the ID course, the evaluation course, the needs assessment course, my side gig as a virtual English teacher to Chinese students, literally in China, the support of my professors and my advisors, and good old daydreaming to get to where I am today. So I think the moral of all of that is really to say that necessity is the mother of invention, and I really attribute a lot of my success to this idea. I think that we need to be reminded to be creative and open to adapting to where we want to go, especially during COVID times, and especially when we seek to build relationships that really matter. For me, living in Mexico while making a career change has been a constant reminder and practice of this. From there, honestly, I'm just really thankful for the OPWL program for always showing their students that relationships matter by giving us real opportunities to exercise this. For example, the evaluation project that I did turned into my current full-time salaried position. Moreover, they've been there for the ever important moral support. I can remember 2 years ago at ISPI asking Dr. Giacumo and her husband how old they were and asking if I was too late in my progress in my career. 1 year ago, I was crying to my graduate advisor, not knowing if anyone was going to hire me. And when I got my current job, Dr. Chung celebrated with me. When I got my first consultant's gig, Dr. Giacumo was there to celebrate with me and give me advice. And my old OPWL teammates were there for me too. Don't get me started on the worried calls that Kelly and especially Joanne have been on the other side to support. So I know that the moral support and all of that coaching has been one of the main keys to my success. So I have found cheerleaders in the OPWL program, and it's really touching, honestly. I hope if you decide to become more directly involved with OPWL that you can find all of this out by yourself. After all, the founders of our program, they had the foresight to start this online learning business for OPWL in 1988. That's over 30 years ago. And now, especially given COVID, look at the support that the world needs from that legacy now, especially even considering the objective of this webinar series. You start to realize that it's all really thoughtful and they all really care so much. Just within OPWL, I really feel like we stand on the shoulders and the hearts of giants. And so we should really feel powerful with our skills too. I can also tell you how sincerely rewarding it's been. For me, it's been a dream to start my career remotely and internationally. It's been an introverted millennial's dream come true, to be honest. So I feel so much self-worth for all the new perspective that I've gained through my opportunities, and making relationships that matter is actually a passion of mine now, not just a necessity. I have to say that when networking comes from a place like this, it really helps us to be aware the opportunities that we might otherwise miss out on. And I have to say, and I really wonder about all the experiences that you guys on this call, everybody on this call, how it's going working remotely together. And I wonder how much you guys think about innovation. So I guess I just really wanted to encourage everyone to do, like when they're trying to make relationships, to just really enjoy it and to lead with your heart, not with your head. Aim for genuine trust and to make exquisite relationships, to maybe be more thoughtful than you thought possible. Maybe try to expand your perspective constantly, especially in a global cultures kind of way. And lastly, have self-awareness and be empathetic to yourself while you're also being empathetic to others. So I say all that, but as students of human performance technology, it's something that we all know how to do naturally already. So I had written all that out if you guys couldn't tell. I'm an introvert after all.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I feel a little emotional. I almost cried as you were giving your talk. So I really appreciate how much thought and heart you put into that. That's clear. It's been clear since the moment I met you. I think I met you before you even came to the program. We had like a call when you were thinking about whether or not you should apply. And we connected then, and I knew I was hoping that you were going to come and hang out with us, and you've also taught me so much, so I really appreciate that too. And you really are a giver. And I wanted you to come here today because you are good at networking. You connect with people, I think, because you are you make yourself authentic and vulnerable. And I know that you've got your professional employment status now because of the connections that you made in our program. So I wanted to have other people get a chance to meet you and know that all of this is possible, right? A real life example. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
I didn't
you.
even get to this slide, the networking strategies. Just quickly reflect on your expression of your unique authenticity and value. Attend virtual events. There are a lot going on now. Go look out for them. There's some that are really exciting. Be innovative and question the norm of how most people gain connections. Be interested in the next generation of HPT. I really think that we all have a hand in what it looks like. I think it's unwritten. And practice and use your foreign language skills in another country, because that's really a good way to practice making relationships, real relationships.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And our very own, last but not least, Kelly Week. He works in the OPWL department with us at Boise State University, and I'm so excited he's here.
All right, well, thank you. And wow, I'm inspired by all the great people who've gone before me tonight, that's for sure. So wonderful advice that I've heard so far. And unfortunately, I'm probably echoing some of that again. So, anyway, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kelly Week. I'm the operations manager for the OPWL department. So my story tonight that I'm going to share with you all is a little bit similar to some of the things you've heard, but mine's a little bit different because my background actually isn't in instructional design or really in HPT other than in the department. And so I graduated in 2009 with my master's in IPT, so the Instructional Performance Technology degree. I actually had my first class with Shelley, who you all met just a few minutes ago. But my experience is in higher education, where I've worked for the last 20 years. The majority of that time I spent in student affairs, in housing, conference services, student activities, student organizations, those types of things. And then for the last 4 years, I've been with the OPWL department. So I am not into using very many virtual networks, but that's one of outside of Facebook. And I kind of consider my email a little bit as a social network, and I'll kind of explain that here in a few minutes. But that's definitely one area after listening tonight that I feel like I need to work on, and so help kind of develop some of my LinkedIn account and kind of expand my network there. So I'll kind of share with you my story. So oh, go ahead. You can actually switch it. That's fine. So my kind of pictures here that I've put on the background kind of symbolize what I'm going to talk about. And so kind of that web of interconnectivity of people is kind of what I view my networking strategy as. So I was actually at a conference about 17 years ago, and I was talking with a former supervisor of mine and told her that I was looking for a job. I was living in California at the time, and decided that California is a very expensive state to live in, and I was looking to move outside of there. And so she kind of sat down with me. We talked about things that I wanted, things I was looking for, kind of the experiences that I had had in my work environment since the last time she was my supervisor. So we just had a wonderful dinner, sharing stories and catching up. Later that day, she actually made an introduction to somebody. And when she went up to him, she actually said, you know, this is Kelly, you need to hire him. And Kelly, you need to work there. And a lot of that was because of how she knows me and what I was looking for. So then after that introduction, she really pushed me to consider a job that they were offering. Not because of the job itself, but because of the people in the organization that it represented. And she knew it fit me, and she knew it fit my values and things that I was looking for. And so 17 years later, I'm still at Boise State. And so that's how I kind of came here. And had it not been for that kind of connection that I made with who was my former supervisor, I probably never would have considered Boise or Boise State. I was actually looking at moving to Oregon or Washington at the time. And so this wasn't even on my radar. And so kind of my networking strategies and kind of what I use my network for is I kind of view them as my GPS a little bit. They help provide me the directions that might give me opportunities to get to someone's doorstep. But I have to do a lot of the work and research to get through that door. And so when I look at organizations that I might be interested in working for, I do a lot of research about who they are, what they're about, and see if it kind of fits who I am, and work with my colleagues, friends, former coworkers, former supervisors, and have them, you know, do you know people that work there? Do you know any opportunities that they might have? And because I maintain those connections with them continually, whether I need them now or not, it's that personal connection that I keep with those folks that I hope to use at a future date. And so I maintain my interest in them, and they keep their interest with me as well. And so it's kind of that relationship that we have going back and forth. And that's where kind of that email comes into place. Is, you know, I'm not always good at picking up the phone. I'm not always good about messaging people through social media or, you know, a lot of those types of things. And so whereas I could send a couple of sentence email chat with them, we can kind of catch up back and forth. And then when I really do need them, then I can actually count on them. So other things that I do too is I write a lot of thank you notes to people. So at various different points, just to help maintain those connections, reminding them of, you know, appreciating them for what they've done in my career. And so every once in a while, I drop emails and thank you notes through, I use Facebook or my email primarily, so to kind of keep those up. Other networking strategies that I do is I volunteer a lot, both professionally and personally, and so for a variety of different reasons. And so I put two of the organizations that I was very involved with and still involved with actually with Susan G. Komen. My wife is actually the executive director, so I'm kind of voluntold. But even before her involvement, I worked with that organization a lot. And so I help them with a variety of different activities and events. I do a lot of their registration and some of the operations behind the scenes, which allows me to meet a variety of different people here in the Treasure Valley, in Coeur d'Alene, as well in Montana, because that's where they kind of work. So I've met people who are CEOs and in a variety of different capacities at companies and organizations that I've now built a volunteer relationship with them that, again, if I ever needed that type of relationship or needed to look for employment opportunity, that's somebody that I can probably go back to and have a conversation with. Also, professional organizations, I listed one here. I was a regional director for that organization, which is basically everything kind of on the West Coast. So I worked with a lot of schools in other capacities and helped advocate for the conference and events industry, which is where I came from before joining the OPWL department. And so meeting people on a regular basis, working with them professionally to advance the organization, as well as to all of our individual goals. So that was something I actually still maintain those relationships. And especially right now, the COVID situation has impacted the events industry pretty drastically. And so I've actually been having some pretty interesting conversations with my colleagues that, though I'm not in their industry anymore, I'm still talking with them about how they're handling things and offering support and help when I can. So that's kind of something that I kind of keep track of. So one of the things that I do have a goal, and I've been actually taking a lot of notes here this afternoon or this evening, I guess, is I want to convert that to be a little bit more structured. So kind of this web that I work with is very old school. That's who I kind of am, but I feel like I need to kind of formalize that a little bit differently. And I think I'm taking a few hints and jotted a few notes about what I've seen people doing and talking about. And that's one thing that I'm hoping to kind of add as well. So I definitely appreciate this opportunity tonight. And like I said, I know my story is a little bit different, but that's kind of how I've utilized my network in kind of advancing my job as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. That was so inspirational. I think those are great points that you made about just maintaining connections, volunteering, meeting new people. It doesn't have to be from our field because so much of our opportunities come from all over the place. So I really appreciate that perspective that you added to our conversation here tonight. And I really appreciate what everybody has given. I feel like I'm learning new things as well. And I'm sure that there are other people here tonight that will echo that, as well as people who will watch in the future. And would also love to say thank you. So thank you all so much. There's such gifts that you guys have shared with us tonight. And if I know some people have to run, we're over time, that's fine. If you do have any questions, I will stay on to facilitate a conversation. And if you are able to stay on any of the presenters, that's lovely. But again, if you have to go, I just want to say thank you so much for all of the gifts that you've shared tonight. Some of you, this was the first time I've seen you in real time. And it was a pleasure to meet you. And I look forward to hopefully staying engaged as after this webinar too. So thanks again to everyone. And if you have any questions, I'm going to start scrolling through the chat. Now is a good time to chat them into the chat box, or if you'd like to, you can unmute yourself and just speak out loud. And let's see. So it looks like Bridget asked about Twitter groups. I don't know if anyone else has any other Twitter groups to recommend. Roberta recommended Guild Chat, or following the handle at eLearning Guild is a great place that she learns from, as well as Learn Chat, or at Learn Chat, LRN Chat, and more Guild Chat. I don't know if fellow introvert, hashtag fellow introvert is from Twitter or just more solidarity.
It's a fact of life.
Yeah. Like I said, don't feel like you're one of none. If you are an introvert, you are in great company in this field. There's lots of introverts, a lot of people here that really like to research, like Roberta was saying, and read, and think about what it all means, ponder the meaning of life, and share it back out again. And actually, that's at least part of our jobs, to stay abreast on what's coming down the pike, why it's coming down the pike, and what it means about tomorrow at work for us all. I don't see any other questions yet, but if you would like to unmute.
Hello, I've unmuted. I was typing, but I figure I'll be faster talking. So thank you so much, Lisa, and all the presenters for all this awesome information. Really, really appreciate it. One question I have came up as I was listening to Brian's presentation, but it's obviously for any of the presenters. Anyone can feel free to hop in. Industry experience versus the instructional design or HPT experience. So I know for myself, I did a little bit of freelancing for a couple of years, and I started off doing some instructional design in early childhood education, and then I ended up getting a contract in doing instructional design in higher ed, and so on and so forth. So I've kind of bounced around industries, and one of the things I've struggled with is building up that base of knowledge in the industry that I'm working in. So talking with higher ed professionals and getting the higher ed knowledge versus making sure that I'm still staying strong in my core of instructional design. So I was just curious in terms of, for you all, how have you balanced between keeping up with the instructional design industry as well as making sure you're knowledgeable about the industry that you're currently serving or working in?
Yeah, I can kind of answer that in a way. I actually work in a product management or user experience role. So I'm like one of the weird people who has always worked on a learning product or service, but never in an HR team or dev team ever. So I kind of split my time between things that I'm interested in. So like, I'm actually pretty regimented about my professional development. I'll always be reading like a management book and then a UX research book and stuff like that. And I'll split my time between different groups too, to make sure that I'm getting a holistic perspective. The thing that I really emphasize to people on my team, my direct reports, and like the people I work with as well is taking a systemic approach. And that was like one of the key takeaways that I got from the program was approach everything with a systemic approach, and you see the holistic trends of things going on that enable you to like jump around from industry to industry or from function to function. You'll see how the parts of the system operate together. And I think that your skill set, all of us in OD, HPT have that they're able to do that. So that's just one way to kind of approach it as well.
Awesome, thanks. Anyone else want to jump in on that one? Oh, Brian, are you muted? Did you want to?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It was *6 got me. It gets me every time. So thank you. Just I didn't catch the name of who asked that question, but it's a really great question, and Roberta's answer was really great as well. You know, the thing that emerged in my mind as you posed that question is, in my experience, the hard and sometimes unwelcome truth is, in every industry I've worked at, the term learning equals a necessary expense or a liability. And I've found it really rare that I've leveraged my ISD background to get a foot in the door of a business leader. You have to couple that with the industry knowledge I think for me, my HPT background has been equally applied. It's not industry specific, but it's my industry knowledge that allows me the credibility to get the attention of the business leaders I need as stakeholders. And so you almost have to lead with that industry knowledge. And so it is absolutely a balance. And I'd recommend you have confidence in your HPT background, but don't necessarily lead with it, if that makes sense. I mean, it's a really practical kind of approach, but it's served me well personally. And I don't bring up instructional design as a tool or an option until I think the stakeholders believe I understand the metrics they're trying to move in their organization. And I don't get that without spending some time diving into the industry and getting mentored by people outside of our industry.
Yeah, Brian, this is Roberta again, to kind of piggyback about that. I love that approach, and that's something that I do within my work as well, is getting to the root cause of the performance problem that's taking place and then recommending solutions based off of that. I'm not an instructional designer by title. I'm a researcher, but I still do instructional design tasks in my day-to-day job. Like I'm helping people upskill and learn research skills and doing needs assessment and evaluation. So I think, again, it's what I try to focus on is like, what's the problem we're going to solve, and then what's the best way to solve it. And that approach will work no matter what industry, no matter what role. And that's the holistic viewpoint, the systemic approach. So yeah.
And I would just add one more thing really, really briefly to that. When I was earlier on, I mentioned that I've hired a number of IPT OPWL grads. I'm old school, so I still refer to it as IPT before I correct myself. But I've hired a lot of OPWL grads, and I mentioned the differentiation between the mindset of an OPWL grad and somebody from a traditional learning background, and it's exactly that. It's the differentiation of that intense performance mindset and the ability to ask relevant questions about the metrics that stakeholders care about that differentiates graduates of this program from other programs, that I've hired team members into. And so that piece it's super critical.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone else want to chime in on that? I know when I was working internally as a consultant, I really spent a lot of time listening and trying to use the stakeholders' language in their terms and asking for, input if I said something that didn't quite ring so true. So it's definitely also a skill that you have to learn to bridge from the HPT OPWL performance improvement instructional design framework that we learn how to look at the world in our program and figure out how to communicate that in the client's own terms to solve the problems that the client cares about. Rachel asked Sharon if there were HPT, HPI specific organizations that are good to join to go get a pulse on the industry. And Sharon mentioned Will Thalheimer's L&D virtual conference. I haven't heard of that one, so thanks for sharing. And LinkedIn, and also Sharon shared a link to that, www.learningdevelopmentconference.com. Thank you so much. Anyone else want to?
I don't know the details of how that came up. It could have been a response of Will's to COVID, but I just know that, he's a really respected name, especially among the academics in our field. And he's going to bring in some of the people that would have been the academics that we care about at ISPI conferences.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Any of your, Leah mentioned the ATD local chapters, ATD national chapters. I also am invested in AECT, Association for Educational Communications Technology. There are some groups in Europe as well. The UK has a cousin to ATD. I'm blanking on the name. right now, that's a good organization. There's AERA if you're really interested in research as well. Although they do less workplace learning, but some.
Roberta, aren't you involved with the OPWL Alumni Club? I saw that on your LinkedIn link.
Yeah, I actually was like kicking myself. I didn't mention it during when I was talking about the slides. I'm the OPWL Alumni Club president, president-elect, so I'll be serving until 2021 November. So we're in our first year. So as soon as you graduate from the OPWL program or a certificate program, you meet the criteria to enter the club. We have a Slack channel that we communicate with each other, and we also do virtual networking events online as well. So if you haven't joined, please join. And we're developing tons of events and special interest topics. So we also work very closely with like the program as well. I talk to Yanni a lot. She'll reach out and talk about trends in the industry and stuff like that. So it's definitely a great community to just keep up the network that we had when we were in the program. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the OPWL Alumni Club. I wonder if faculty are allowed to join that or not.
You can, if you'd like to be admitted to the Slack channel, I can add you in. You can shoot me an email. We are like carving out a space. Like I know Joanne is on the Slack channel, so is Yanni. So if you want to stay connected, you can do that too.
Awesome. I would love to.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll have to add Slack to my daily routines. Anyone else?
Are you saying that the OPWL department hasn't adopted Slack into their remote working yet?
No, no. I mean, maybe individuals. It sounds like Yanni has, but not as a whole. No.
Yeah, Yanni has been like, I've been so impressed. She is so responsive on it, and like I'll message her a random question and she's just like on it immediately. It's great.
That's awesome. Any other questions?
Is the OPWL department enjoying full remote working?
No, I think we're all missing each other.
Aww.
Because we have that face-to-face culture. You know, we have morning check-in meetings that a lot of people show up to. We're doing a lot of video. But I think everyone's kind of anxious to get back to campus.
Yeah, definitely miss everybody, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's just not the same. Thank you again for everyone for your contributions, your questions, your answers, and your sharing and your time. Thank you so much.